Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Shea. Happy holidays. I'm here to present my research paper for a senior seminar class. Um, I have 7 days to graduate. I'm sure a lot of you who are taking this class and watching this video are in the same circumstances. I'm very much looking forward to graduation and my upcoming application to grad school. The title, as you can see, that I picked for my research paper was "Effects of Divorce on Children." The reason I picked this topic was um, my career for the last 20 years. I work for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I do homeless outreach. And besides directly asking somebody what reason, how did they become homeless, I always get around to that, but I always wondered why, how did somebody become homeless? And it rarely, if ever, is a series of catastrophic things that happen in their life that causes someone to be like someone loses a job or he gets ill and he doesn't have medical insurance and the dominoes fall in the wrong spot. It doesn't really happen that way. A lot of times what happens is I found many of my clients have substance abuse issues, and when I delve further into their lives, I found that many of them came from broken homes. Now, I'm not saying everybody from a broken home is homeless or vice versa, but there was definitely a direct correlation, and I thought this paper would be interesting. That would help me in my own career. Um, we all know what divorce is, but the legal term is the dissolution of a marriage. And I found it really hard to believe that how many marriages end in divorce in the United States. It's over 50%. And if you think about it, those are the ones that just get divorced. What about people that are unhappy and don't get divorced, maybe because of their religion or their children or for whatever reasons? And since the 70s, rates just continue to climb and climb and climb. It's very rare now. I wouldn't say rare, but it's no longer unusual for anybody to see a single parent now for a family unit. Um, for a long time, we realized that people would always come up to the adults that are getting divorced and they feel bad for them. They talk to this one, but a lot of times the kids are left out. Divorce affects both adults that are ending their relationship and the kids. So all memory, everybody in the family is affected. If conflict is present, divorce can end this, but it still may leave children with emotional scars. So what does that mean? You know, Schools realize now that kids aren't even considered in the process of divorce and therefore may exhibit signs of withdrawal, loneliness, depression, or even a change in behavior. Divorce definitely causes emotional, physical, psychological, and behavioral issues in children. And then we realize that children may suffer long-term effects from divorce. How do we know that? We see that in everyday lives. But what we realize, it takes a long time before sometimes people realize that. And usually teachers are the first to know that. The topic that affects the divorced children both socially, academically, have been researched for a long time. Life course study done in the Netherlands suggests that overwhelmingly that divorce causes family disruption, financial instability, and often the change of residence for the child. Relationships with mothers and fathers tend to become more strained. Just think about that. Here's a child, they're used to waking up in the same bed, their clothes are in the same plot, they're book bag, they eat the same meals, and now all of a sudden that changes. Just think of the effect that has on kids. And then the parents who are dealing with their own issues sometimes don't have the same, that time to notice what's going on because they're so wrapped up in their own lives. So if you look at this, the Peabody Achievement Test and the CAT testing score shows a definitive decline in academic scores for divorced children in both math and reading in children's, grades, K through 5. The American studies show an even further decline in test scores during post-divorce periods. So that's always something that people need to look out for. National Survey of Children's Health adolescent grades were compared of intact families to those that were divorced. Now, I think the results here aren't that unusual. I think we would tend to understand that this is what happened. Only 18% of children of divorce received A's, as opposed to 28% of those in two-parent families. That's a pretty big difference. 78% of children of divorced parents graduated high school, as compared to 96 to those. That's a big deal. That's a lot. So now when we look at teenage years, 12 to 24, these are kids now that they're out on their own and stuff like that, and then this is when we start seeing these risky behaviors. Females experience more stress, depression, and insecurity. Males start experiencing more hostility, instability, and low self-esteem. Both males and females participated more in substance abuse, tobacco use, and criminal activity. Just think about that. There's no way that you can't have this direct correlation between these two, between divorce and what happens with kids. And as I mentioned before, teachers were the first ones to start to recognize these changes in children. When you think about it, the teacher's objective, they're not wrapped up in their own lives. They're seeing these kids for hours at a time. So often parents are either too involved in the conflict that's going on between them or too emotionally upset to find out what the needs of the children are. And this is a really scary part. Often long periods of time elapse before these issues are addressed. So this stuff is definitely accumulating in these children. Negative effects were also seen in cognitive and psychological development, according to the early childhood longitude studies done on 668 children. Think about that. The average child of divorce is 6 months behind. Think in a very short period of time at school, 6 months behind cognitively, and suffer some sort of psychological decline during and after the divorce process. So we see this as something that's cumulative. It goes on and on. Often outside intervention is needed for the child and the family. You know, a lot of people, one, maybe they don't have the money, they don't think it works, but therapy would definitely be a thing that these families would help. Some of these kids probably think that they caused this. They caused the problems of the family to separate. They'll do anything to keep the families together. You know, another study that I looked at of 20,000 school-aged children studied, it was found that change in economic resources, parent relationships, and changing residence causes instability in a child's life. Again, this is what we talked about before. Somebody wakes up in a new house. 1 week they're staying at the mother's house. 1 week they're staying at the father's house. I mean, just think about adults in school, how hard it is to make our schedules, and we know where we're going every night. For these kids, very, very difficult for them to be able to have a stable life, not knowing where they're going night to night. So communication becomes strained between both the mother and the child, the father and the child, and the mother and the father. This is where therapy would be an amazing, amazing thing for these kids. I almost think it should be mandatory in a divorce settlement that there be some kind of mandatory therapy. So as you can see from many studies, divorce causes change in the family structure. Loyalty conflict, stress in children, which in turn leads to behavioral issues and decline in academics and a child's social well-being. You know, again, I think these kids often think that it's their own fault, and the parents need to be aware of that. You know, we need a license for a lot of different things, and we need a license to drive, and we need a license to become social workers, but you don't need a license to have a child. There's no manual that comes with it. So divorce definitely negatively impacts children, and we need to find earlier and better interventions to help them through this traumatic change. How do we do that? Again, I think it goes back to definitely, I think therapy is a major thing that would be important for these kids to go through. And again, I think it should be mandatory. I think that we should, if somebody's getting divorced and there's children involved, that the parents need to get together with a family therapist and talk these issues out. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening. And what I'd like to say is, everybody else, good luck with the rest of your endeavors for graduation, for your continuing education. I'm certainly not going to miss some of these discussion board questions in and out daily. It was definitely a rush. I mean, week to week, very, very little time off. My computer went everywhere with me. So I wish everybody the best of luck, and thanks for everything. Bye.